This is India, a country that if you look at it from the outside, you'll see they're a guy. Economic giant with GDP numbers grand, huge economic scale, very rich billionaires and cities modern. But if you look closer, more specifically, you will see a completely different picture. Hundreds of millions of people still live in poverty, slum, earning less than $2 a day. So why is India so rich and yet so poor? Let's start with a number that makes anyone also have to admire. According to the Monetary Fund International IMF 2025, estimated GDP of India reaches 4.19 trillion US dollars, bringing this country becomes a major economy. Fourth in the world, surpassing both the UK and France, slightly better than Japan. The country is ranked after the US, China and Germany. This is the figure of the International Monetary Fund. IMF and other figures may also will be a little different. Then India still standing below Japan. It is predicted that in just a few years India will surpass Germany to become the largest economy, third in the world by 2028, with GDP is estimated at $5 trillion. Listen. Then you have the Indian pair like a economic superpower or not. But don't be too happy yet, because GDP is the size of the economy. And when it comes to people's lives, talking about the level prosperity we must divide to, there is a figure called median income people. If you divide this huge GDP figure by population over 1.4 billion people, populous country, the most populous in the world, you will see everything. Imagination is not sparkling at this time. The average income per capita of India reaches less than $3,000 per year, and this number is much lower than developed countries, even lower both developing and low-income countries, more than Vietnam. Vietnam has achieved about $4,800 per person per year. You can use calculator to multiply it how many million and you at what number. This means an Indian average earns much less more than a person in other countries, although India's overall economy is very big. So the big question here is, where did all the money go? The answer lies in that one quality keyword, is inequality. This is a picture from Mumbai, one of the most bustling cities in India. Degree. Somewhere you will see buildings, shiny skyscrapers, cars, luxury, and 5-star restaurants serving dishes costing thousands of dollars America one meal. But just turn a side street next to it, you will come across a slum crowded, where millions of people live in the dilapidated huts. There is no clean water, no electricity, and struggling to earn enough money to buy a meal. This is not a movie script of India, which is the reality in India. Degree. It is estimated that only the richest 5% of India's population owned more than 62% of the total assets of the land. This country, while 50% of the population is poor, the richest people own only 3% of the assets. That's it? Is a terrible difference. That is to say, in India wealth is concentrated into a group so small that it is almost unbelievable. Now imagine, you will eliminate 5%, the richest person, out of the calculation to calculate per capita income. India's numbers are now down just over $1,100 a year. That is much lower than other countries, the poorest in Africa. This figure shows a fact. India is a country of two worlds. One, the world of the super rich, and a world of the poor. Talking about the super oil level of India, the number India's billionaire population is growing rapidly. As money counters, In 2000 India only there were 9 billionaires, but now this number has surpassed 120 billionaires on the billionaire list. Forces wealth. The wealth of billionaires this also increased dozens of times in a decade. Century, and on average every day India has 70 new millionaires added. But the problem is that this wealth is not spreading down, not dripping down the lower classes. While the billionaire buys yachts and private planes, hundreds of millions of Indians still do not have a decent meal. To better understand India's position, let's compare per capita income and economic inequality of this country with some other countries in the world. Let's start with China. China is India's giant neighbor. India has surpassed China in terms of population, number, and now two countries. No country. Which country wants to let the other country surpass in terms of other competitive stories, especially business, economic, and recently military as well? China's per capita income now is about over $1,600 America, about 5 times that of India. Because why is there such a big difference? Because China has gone through thousands of decades of economic reform, strong focus, and production and export, helping to create millions of jobs for industry. Meanwhile, India, although having a fast rapid economic growth but still heavily dependent on agriculture and services. In addition, inequality in China yes but lower thanks to policies redistribution of income and strong investment and infrastructure. However, China also has individual but general issues. Chinese people have an average standard of living much higher than India. Next, let's look at Vietnam itself. Ours. A Southeast Asian country that many people think that India is poorer than India. But what about the reality? Average income. Vietnam's per capita population was about $4,800, almost twice that of India. Vietnam has made good use of its geographical location and its cheap labor force to become a global manufacturing center. Demand, especially in industries such as electronics and garments. Water companies, in addition to investing billions of dollars in Vietnam, create millions of stable jobs. Meanwhile, India is still struggling with attracting foreign investment to production due to barriers such as red tape and poor infrastructure. Regarding inequality, Vietnam also does better thanks to agricultural support policies, rural and public education. However, Vietnam there are still challenges such as dependency on exports and income gap between urban and rural areas. But clearly it is clear that the average Vietnamese person has higher income and stable life than India. Now you want to continue living in Vietnam, try India to live. Compare with a country. India's neighbor is also Bangladesh. Many people may be surprised knowing that the average income per capita Bangladeshi people are similar to Indians. Bangladesh has made great strides, significant progress in the past few decades, especially in the textile industry, which accounts for more than 80% of the country's exports. Finally, let's look at a country developed like America to see the difference on a different scale. Average income per capita in the US is about more than $89,000, 31 times that of India. This difference comes from a high-tech economy, a system advanced education system, a market, America's diverse workforce. Of course America is not heaven either. the way to equality, but thanks to the system, social welfare system and employment opportunities diverse, American people, even low-income people, still have a standard of living much higher than most Indians. For example, an average worker in the US can earn $15–20 or even more per hour, while a worker in India degree can only earn $1–2 per now. So where does India stand in this regard? This picture? Even though they have the size of the economy, large economy, per capita income low, and high levels of inequality causing India to fall behind many countries, including developing countries development like Vietnam. This shows that economic size is not everything, not every large GDP is good. It is important to allocate resources, and creating opportunities for new people is the key decision. Now let's dive into the basics. Root causes of inequality in India become a big problem and make India the degree of both rich and poor. First is uneven development. In Indian industries, technology industry, information and services are booming in India. Degrees. Especially cities, for example like the city of Bengaluru, which is known as the Silicon Valley of Asia. But this industry employs only 5–7% of the workforce. Workers, mainly those with high-level graduates from schools, reputation. Perhaps you have also been close see the problem. That is, those people working in this industry is few, but they have very high income. A number unthinkable to the majority of the population. Because more than 40% of the population still work in agriculture. Industry is low productivity, easily affected by the weather. The season brings bad harvests, floods, and droughts can push not only one farmers and their families and the landscape. Poverty. Another factor that is always mentioned is that inequality in Indian society over caste system. A historical story. History, a legacy that still deeply influences to this day. In the system, in this society is divided into groups based on above the hierarchy and those of the lower class, which are the Dalits, often limited in their access to education, in work, and in possession property. In theory, the Constitution India has banned discrimination based on caste. The Indian government and the authorities have taken various policies support books as a priority in education and employment. But social inequality association is still a latent thing in Indian society. In addition, discrimination gender is also a big issue. We think that Asian countries are divided. Sexism abounds, but in India gender discrimination is even more terrible. Indian women's labor participation rate only about 20% according to the World Bank, means too low. But few people go to work, then less material wealth is created. Many women had to stay at home because social norms. For example, must be home care, stay home to child care. They do not have access to education. Full education. This makes many people depends only on one's income, and that was the man. Furthermore, this increases the risk of poverty. Hungry. Then there are problems like people always said in underdeveloped countries, what is that development? It is corruption and bureaucracy. Salary in welfare programs, assistance, food, or cash grants are not usually provided. Reach the poor through greed, poor management and infrastructure post. Overall, these are stories that any low-income country are also facing. And while the majority of the population struggles with poverty, the elite class of India again getting richer and richer. The beneficiaries the most benefited are the billionaires and the elite. Middle class, upper class, those stock and real estate investors, products and emerging industries. But this wealth is not contagious. Down to the lower classes that mainly focus on a small group. In conclusion, India is a place where we see full of contradictions. On the one hand, this is an economic giant with a fast pace, fast growth, middle class expanding, stock market boom. But on the other hand, hundreds of millions people still live in poverty, abandoned behind in the economic race. Figures on average income per capita, people and inequality show it is clear. India's wealth is focused on a small group of people only, while the majority of the population is still suddenly make a living. Compare with China, America, or even Vietnam, we see that India has great potential, but still there are still many challenges to overcome. And honestly, with what we have through, with the stories of society, Indian society is still happier in Vietnam very much. Thanks for your attention. Follow this story. If you find it interesting, you can press the channel subscribe button, turn on general announcement and sharing. And now then, please say goodbye. Thank you for your support. Passing through the lands, discover new things. Don't hesitate to leave your comments.